Они закрыли, вот эти, которые пришли вот с ворот сторожа, они закрыли их домой, вот в подвал, и потом сожгли их.
Мама, брат, братишка, и два, который один племянник был. У нее двое маленьких, один вот такой, один 3-летний ребенка. Еще один дочка, вот это, как это, сестренкина дочь.
The scale of the violence was, I think, quite shocking. What really struck me when I got there was just that so many neighborhoods, and so many neighborhoods that were Uzbeks, had been targeted, had been destroyed, and they had been destroyed because they were Uzbek. And we could see that on the walls of the buildings. People had marked them, they had written either Kyrgyz or Russian. And those buildings, they were still standing. Nobody had touched them. But all the other buildings in certain neighborhoods, all the buildings that belonged to Uzbeks, they'd been burned down and they had been completely destroyed.
The violence started late at night on June 10th in Osh with a massive gathering of Uzbek crowd that the police initially tried to disperse with peaceful means, was unsuccessful, and then called some support from the militaries. That same night, the Uzbeks did commit serious crimes. Eventually, Uzbeks retreated to their neighborhoods and barricaded themselves in. Rumors of horrendous abuses by the Uzbeks started spreading outside of town, and the Kyrgyz started arriving.
When the violence started, it very quickly became systematic. What we documented was very similar attacks over several days in many Uzbek neighborhoods, and they all followed a similar pattern. First, you would have heavy military vehicles, like an armored personnel vehicle, that removed the barricades, shot at people. There would be gunmen on rooftops in nearby that would fire at people. And then you would have a large group of ethnic Kyrgyz coming into the neighborhoods, looting the houses and setting them on fire, basically burning them down to the ground. We documented widespread use of heavy military vehicles in these attacks. The government has said that some of these vehicles were commandeered by the Kyrgyz crowds, but the nature and scope of the use of them strongly suggest that also some of the government forces were either directly participating in the attacks or at least facilitating these attacks.
Там были какие-то номера?
У них номера не были. Просто сверху сидели военные, автоматы. Они подъехали, да? Они начали открыли коридор. Сзади их население.
Начали сжигать дома. Мы же испугались, пустыми руками, что будем делать?
The main violence started in the evening on June 10th, and already that night and in the morning on June 11th, people started building barricades. The government forces eventually negotiated with the Uzbek leaders to take down these barricades, so most of the barricades were then removed on the 19th and on the 20th of June. And then on the 21st of June, Nariman happens.
We had received a call in the morning from one of our local contacts that there is a sweep operation going on in the village of Nariman.
We immediately went out there to see what was going on, and we first stopped at the hospital there. We could see people were still coming in. They had been beaten up early in the morning, but then they had been too afraid to leave their houses.
They described groups of military and police coming into their houses, beating them severely.
There was one person who died right there at the hospital when we were there. He had just come in and he died in the hallway as we were standing there. And people were showing us their passports, their documents that had been torn and burned by the security forces that very morning.
Сказали, что еще нам не нужно это паспорт. Вам паспорт не нужно. Вы не люди теперь, вы нам раби будете говорить.
Nariman became the sign that convinced us that there were real problems with the way the authorities were dealing with the aftermath of the violence. In the beginning, there were these big security operations like the Nariman operations. Now we see much more targeted operations where the security forces are picking up individuals.
As we were on the ground, we started seeing killings, arbitrary arrests, and large-scale pattern of torture in detention that was targeted predominantly against ethnic Uzbeks.
The security forces do not introduce themselves. They don't tell the relatives where they're taking the detainees to. It's extremely important that there be an international investigation into the violence that can objectively look into what happened, the reasons for why it happened, and also the government's involvement in it. The violence was enormous and it came suddenly. However, the government completely failed to intervene to stop the violence when it had erupted. And for 4 days, mobs were allowed to roam about the city freely and attacking, killing, looting, and burning down houses.